Welcome everyone to Defining Tanya. We're on the home stretch. We're up to Ois Reish. Last week was a very important class. We went through Klipa and also Kedusha Klipa. It was they're both together, both Kuf, Klipas Noigas, Klipas Timaeus. So Reish is Ruach Shtus. Ruach Shtus is the reason why we do Aveiras. That is the only reason why Yid does an Aveira. So it would make sense that we should really understand what Ruach Shtus is. If you understand what Ruach Shtus is, you understand. It says, was it Lo yichoyte ela nichnas by Ruach Shtus. The only someone's only over, you will only do an Aveira because of Ruach Shtus. So if you know what a Ruach Shtus is, that should really give you a tremendous shmira against Aveiras. So what's Ruach Shtus? So we've spoken about this many times, but a Ruach Shtus is from two words. The basic translation is it's a spirit of insanity. And I suppose, it's not, we don't want to take it out of the pshat in that it is a spirit of insanity, meaning that a Yid only does an Aveira because he goes mad. Meaning you have to lose touch with who you are to do an Aveira. You can't do a Jew can't do an Aveira. A Jew is a chelik elikai mimal, so you can't do an Aveira. So what when they translate it as just an insanity, a temporary insanity, yeah, that what that means is that you obviously forgot who you were, and therefore an Aveira was possible. And that's the pshat, and it's not, it doesn't go out from the pshat. But the oimek of it is that you break it down into two words, ruach and shtus. Ruach is the lashon of emotions, yeah? You have the five chalakim of the neshama. Al pi the Arizal, you have nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida, which al pi the Chabad model, which is an important thing to know, it goes, anyone knows how it goes? Nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. How does it go al pi Chabad? It goes levushim, midas, seichel, ratzon, oineg. Okay? And that goes with the Shem Hashem, Malchus, Ze'ampin, Ima, Abba, Kesa. It's all the same. It breaks down. The five breaks down in endless ways, in endless bechinas. So Ruach is the midas, is emotions. Yeah? Or in English you would say behavior is the lowest. From the top, it goes pleasure, will, the will to live, intelligence, emotions, behavior. That's the system. You need, if you're a psychologist, like to not know that as a psychologist is pasha absurd. I'm trying to think of the strongest word I can think of. To not understand this breakdown of pleasure, will, intelligence, emotions, behavior, yeah. Oineg, rotzen, seichel, midas, levushim, and to understand what levushim is, machshavadi b'maisa, thought, speech, action. To not understand that as a psychologist is like it's like being a makeup lady, being a blind makeup lady. It's going to be a disaster, literally. So ruach is emotions. Shtus, as we know, is from Lashon shita. Shita is ideology, which basically means identification with X. That's Lashon shita, which is Lashon soton, yeah, which is Lashon Atse shitim, the pillars that held up the Mishkan. Yeah, that's the concept of that's the concept of identification. Identification is when your sense of self and X merge. If you're identified with your football team, when they win, you're happy. When they lose, you're sad. If you're identified with your car, yeah, when it's working well and it looks great, you're happy. When you get a scratch or a puncture, you're sad. Yeah, when you're identified with your level of divine service, yeah, if all of a sudden you do something wrong, it destroys you. Yeah, because why? Because you and that thing merge. That's what it means, identification. So ruach shtus means, and this is the central point of the reason why we're able to do an Avera is because we have identified with that emotion. It's funny because I'm just writing about this now in for the living the life. We're about to get into do what matters. So why is it that you don't do what matters? Why is it, Simon? Why is it that you can't write that email that you need to write, and instead you're gonna like end up, you know, doing something else?
You do what you want to do. You don't want to get distracted by you're distracted by something that's really easy for you to consume
But so,
and not.
but why is it that you can't? Why is it that that thing distracts you, and you can't get on with the email? Meaning, like that's fine. You're saying, but what's actually happening is that you need to write that email. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very important. But because the emotion to not write that email has been identified with, well, right now you are the emotion of I don't want to write the email. How could the emotion of I don't want to write an email write the email? It can't.
Mm.
It just can't. The only way of being able to write that email is by some level of disidentification with that emotion of I don't want to write that email. But what happens so that's the reason why so you're sitting there and some juicy lashon hara comes to mind, yeah? Why can't you not say it? I mean, hopefully you don't say it, but the person who does say that lashon hara, why? She knows it's an avera. Yeah, you know that it's not. Hashem doesn't like, and you like push out your mind, and you just spit it out. Yeah, but where's that desire? Why is that desire so hard to overcome? And it is like these desires are so hard to overcome because we are identified with them. It's not that I have a desire to say lashon hara. It's I am the desire to speak lashon hara at the ultimate level. And if you actually become the desire to speak lashon hara, that person will speak the lashon hara. There's no. It's like we've said. If a person's angry, yeah, the way that we learn in reclaiming sanity, quiet mind, is to say there's anger in me. Like I said to my wife the start of this after I got out, I have a shliff in the afternoon, and I was feeling like down, yeah. And I turned around to my wife and I said to her, there's a feeling of depression in me. That's a very helpful way of saying it. And she said to me, hopefully it will pass soon. I was like, Amen. And then within 5 minutes it was gone. Yeah, but to say there's a feeling of depression in me, or there's a feeling of anger in me. Now, what we'd say is I'm angry or I'm depressed. But you know what would be even more powerful for us to get over it? Instead of saying there's three options. I'm angry is the power of option. The kosher option is there's anger in me. What would be the treif option? There's anger in me. That's the best option. The power of option, which is not really power, it's still destructive, is I am angry. But what would be the treifest but truest emotion?
I am anger.
Yes, perfect. Shkoyach. Not I am angry, I am anger. No one ever says that because that's too like. Imagine if you're in a pub and someone says, I am anger.
Well, what's the difference? I am anger and I am angry. One is.
well, I
I
am
guess it's a little.
well, I am angry. Angry is an adjective, yeah? So
Hmm.
there's me who's being angry. I am anger. That's a noun. That means I am. That's a more that. But that's a real a guy who's a rageaholic. I'm sure you've met. I've met a rageaholic. Yeah, a guy who literally he's in top. He loves being angry. You know, and he is anger. That's what he is. So it's like it's no one would ever say I am anger, yeah. But that's a really accurate way of saying it. Now, if a person says I have anger in me, there's a very, very good chance that very shortly he won't feel that anymore. It's just moving through me. That's why it's called ruach. It's a ruach. Just goes through. And you know that, like I tell you, it was I've learned these amazing things about smoking over the past few couple of months. I smoked at Yona's Hasna, and then I allowed my smoke to. I love smoking. I have a big time to smoke cigarettes, but I don't smoke. Yeah, only on Purim. But for Yona's wedding, I smoked at his Hasna, and then I allowed myself to smoke for the Sheva Brochas. Yeah, why? Not quite sure, but I learned something amazing. I told you this, no? How the taiva to smoke, the actual addiction to nicotine, because I got actually re-addicted to nicotine. Yeah, I haven't smoked properly for 13 years. Yeah, but I got re-addicted to nicotine. I smoked like for a whole week. Like I was smoking, just under a pack a day for a week. Yeah. So my body got re-addicted to nicotine. But I wasn't worried about quitting, so to speak, because I realize like my lifestyle isn't smoking. I'm not a smoker, so I don't, so what I realized that like this, once I stopped, once the show block was finished and I quit, was that the actual desire to have a cigarette, the actual desire for nicotine is like it's like a very subtle scratch, like a very subtle itch that you don't have to itch. It's not like sugar, yeah. When you need sugar, yeah, or even worse, salt. But you don't usually need salt. I remember one time I needed salt one time, and it was crazy how I needed to eat salt. But when you need sugar, yeah, you're like going around the kitchen trying, and you really, but that's not how it is with nicotine. It's much less. Much less. So why is it so impossible to quit smoking? Why is quitting smoking so hard?
Because that's who you are. You're a smoker.
Yeah, but what makes what? Yeah, but that's true. But just Lemisa, what makes quitting smoking so hard is not the actual addiction to nicotine. It's the fact that at 8:30, as soon as you finish davening, you have a cigarette and a cup of coffee. And then at 10 o'clock, after you've worked for an hour, you have a cigarette. And then at 12 o'clock before mincha, you have a cigarette. And it becomes part of your day. It's habit stacking the wrong way round. And it's one of the most difficult things to break. The actual addiction to nicotine itself, and I only make sense now because I read this book by Alan Carr years ago. He was saying this, I didn't understand it because when you're a smoker, you think it's impossible to quit, but you don't realize what's impossible to quit is the habit of smoking, not the actual physical addiction to the nicotine. That's a very subtle addiction. What makes it impossible is the habit stacking that you have your cigarette then, you have your cigarette in this situation, or when your wife's angry, you have another cigarette, or when you miss the bus, you have a cigarette, or at 2 o'clock, you have a cigarette, or, Motzi Shabbos, you have your cigarette, whatever it is. So now that's the wait, why did we go there with smoking? I'm talking about anger. Yeah, because I I had this I was davening, it was Shachris, it was about 3 days after the last Sheva Brochas. So I hadn't smoked for 3 days, it was fine. But Chaim had left a packet of cigarettes in my car. Yeah, about four cigarettes in there. And
Yeah.
when I was davening, it was just after Shemona Esrei, and this taiva to smoke came through me that was like, thank God it came through me while I was in Shachris davening. I was like, I was I was already planning how I was gonna get to the car and get a lighter and have my and smoke the cigarette and and it was like signed and sealed in my head. It was that and I knew I shouldn't, because I knew that if I smoked that cigarette, then there's a good chance that I would fall back into smoking. So there's so much riding on it. But the Tiver was like, it was so unimaginably strong. I had no way around it. Wow. But because I was in davening, it was a chesed from Hashem to learn this. Because I was in the middle of Shachris, I'm not going to go out and have a cigarette in the middle of Shachris, yeah? So I ended up having to wait it out. It completely, what's the word, dominated my mind for all of Chazar Hashatz all the way through until I was taking off my talis and Actually, I didn't take off my talis and tefillin to give me but by the time I was walking out of Shimon HaTzadik, I didn't really need the cigarette anymore. And by the time I got back to my house, yeah, I just took that packet of cigarettes and threw it in the bin. What was half an hour before unimaginable had just passed through, and it was like nothing.
It ruined your tefillah though, probably.
Well, at least I learned this. It was worth it, ruined it to filler, but it taught me a lesson. That was worth something.
Mhm.
But do you hear that the idea is we have these tivers that come through, and that's all they are. They're a ruach. They just waft through. While they're wafting through in the middle, yeah, they're like unassailable. But that's to do with the identification. Once you're aware that it's just wafting through, and I remember when I wanted that cigarette, it wasn't there's a desire, I wasn't thinking, it was so powerful. I wasn't thinking there's a desire to have a cigarette in me. I was thinking, I want a cigarette. I am smoking. That's what I was really thinking. I am smoking. That's what a rosh is. A rosh means that the Avera, the desire for the Avera comes as a ruach, as an emotion. It wafts through, but it's a ruach shtus, meaning that you identify with that emotion. And you've got that desire to speak Lashon Hara, and it is, like I said, it's not that there's a desire of Lashon Hara wafting through you. It's not even I want to speak Lashon Hara. It's I am Lashon Hara at that point. And if a person falls into that place and there's the opportunity to speak, yeah, Lashon Hara, we said. That's why Ruach Shtus is the Makor of all Avera. And that's why the Pshat is also accurate, that it is a temporary insanity. Why? Because you forget who you are. You think you were an Arsenal supporter. You were an Arsenal supporter, but you were a Manchester United supporter for that 10 minutes. Like you were a Yisrael, you were identified with the Rabbanu. You are a Yisrael, meaning a Chelek Elokei Mimal, yeah. But you became identified with the Avera of looking at bad stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Shmuel, you're saying that you identify with it. Okay, that makes sense. But you also are saying that it's just wafting through. How could those seem?
No, well, that's the point. In truth, it's wafting through. The problem is if you identify with it as it's wafting through. That's
Got
what
it.
causes the Avera. If it's just wafting through, that's like when you want to say that biting thing to your wife and you're able to bite your lip because it's not you. It's a desire to say something that there's no benefit to say and it's not nice and it will go through. But the minute you identify with that, then you say it.
So
It's
what would
it's
be a
like
good?
I was going to say it's like when someone's when you're shoygeg, that's why it's always say mashigana. Yeah, it's an accident. It's not
Well,
you.
no, shogig is different. Shogig means it was like a mistake. It wasn't oines, meaning shogig means you didn't know it was Shabbos and you lit a cigarette, or you didn't know that smoking a cigarette on Shabbos was. Shogig doesn't require ruach shtus. Shogig just requires being silly. being shogeg means it was a chasson das of you didn't know it was an avera. It's not. It doesn't. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about doing like shogeg with lashon hara would mean that you didn't know that what this was
Right.
lashon hara. But we're saying you know it's lashon hara and you can't override it. So it's not shogeg. It's mazid.
But when you do when you're talking about that in Yom Rayim, you're saying you you had a like a ruach shtus took over you, and you were not who you were, and you did the avera. It mentioned the lashon is like meshuga in certain part.
Meshuga, you're saying shogeg and meshuga is the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
word.
yeah,
Yeah, maybe like they drush it like that. I never thought like that.
yeah. I think that's just the in the
Shogeg and
yeah,
meshuga is the
yeah.
same.
You were saying like okay, so you tell your wife says something, does something, you want to bite your lip, right? You want it to pass. You don't want to identify with the anger,
Only
right? But
sometimes. Other times you're plotting to say it, no?
yeah, so but to let it pass takes time. I think you said 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, let's say.
Okay, so what would be an eitzah? You can't bite your lip for 5 minutes. So what would be a good eitzah to let it pass?
That depends on how you work. That there could be there's lots of answers. Think about Gehenna. You could think about Gehenna in this world. You could think about the fact that you also make mistakes. I'll tell you what I did yesterday. Yeah, my wife was getting all excited about like fancy dress for Purim, yeah? And she's talking to one of my daughters about fancy dress for Purim. I'm sitting at the table and I'm like in my mind, I'm like, oh please. Yeah, yeah. And then and you know what I did? I thought about the fact that I like watching snooker. You know what you Americans know what
Yeah,
snooker.
billiards.
Like, yeah, I really like watching snooker. Yeah, I just love the precision of it. I love it. I love the sound of it. I love the movement. I love the visuals. I love the colors. And so I'm listening to my wife talk about fancy dress, and I'm saying to myself, Diamond, you like to watch snooker. Yeah. Most people in the world think you're mad. And I appreciate that they think I'm mad. And it really helped me it was a really powerful thing that I just did because I'm sitting there thinking, how can we be talking seriously about fancy dress for Purim? Yeah. And then I'm realizing that why? Because they like that for whatever reason. I don't know why. Yeah, that's just them. Just like I like snooker, and nobody else could sit there and watch snooker. You know what I'm saying? So that's a very good answer to just seeing yourself like when your wife does something silly, yeah, like she does something that's silly, yeah, and I think to myself, well, Diamond, you've got no ability with languages. Someone says something to me, a 5-year-old says something to me, Pasha in Hebrew, I don't understand. So that again, like that, those are ways that you can just have Rahmanas, and if you can have a shtickle that's really the eights of the Tanya is a shtickle Rahmanas, and that actually the Rahmanas turns it all into and Rahmanas is only just a din on thinking a little bit, like you have Rahmanas on yourself, you make mistakes all the time, so she also makes mistakes. She thinks like this, you think like that, and whatever it is. But again, however you do it, what your goal is just to bide some time. That's what you're trying to do. You're just trying to just bide some time. If you you know yeah, that's what I'm saying. You could even think, well, if I shout at her that, I'm much better than that. Yeah, that's not a really good thing to say, but it's better than shouting at her. Yeah, much better. So whatever you can do to bide some time, and then you'll realize that it will waft through. I mean, there's more, it's more complicated. There's more going on as well. But that's Roshtus. Roshtus is the Makor of all Averas. Hi. Is the Makor of all Averas. Is it hi?
Tally.
Oh, Tally.
For
Hi,
me.
Tally. You look like
Hi.
Tally with those glasses. It's the Makor of all Avera because it's the only time when a Yisrael stops being a Yisrael and he or she becomes anger or envy or resentment or bitterness or whatever is going to be the emotion that causes the Avera. So it's called a Ruach Shtus. And in that Lashon that Chazal so brilliantly gave it, or so divinely gave it as they did with all That's a very important idea, just as a side point, is to remember that the words that Chazal use to name everything is the inyan, mamash, in the most profound way it could ever be. Whatever Chazal called it is absolutely the whole concept in that idea. So anyway, Ruach Shtus is the idea of identifying with um, with um, identifying with our emotions, which are negative emotions, and that causes us to behave in a negative way. And if it wasn't for that, then we wouldn't do Averas. Let's watch this. So we learned Ra back in the beginning of the Sefer with Tov and Ra. So next week is Shindaladim Yehudoyim and Shindalim Necharuim and Shchina. And then we've got Seichel, Simcha, Torah, Tanya, Tshuva. We're right at the final, the end point. It's been a big project. It's been good. Sure. Okay.